to cloud.
All right. Good evening, ladies. I want to apologize if I sound funky because I have the plague, but hey, everybody else does too, so we're good. All right. Tonight we're going to talk about basic honeybee biology, Apis mellifera L, better known as Western honeybees. All right. A true insect. It's got three main body parts that you could see in that picture there. You got the head, you got that thorax in the middle, and then that big old abdomen. On the head, bees have five eyes. They've got three little simple eyes that they're just used for light intensity. And then they have two big compound eyes that they see color and light and get directional information from the sun. They have a tongue, better known as a proboscis. And if you ever look at the pictures of bees where somebody has a drop of honey and the bees are all around it, you'll see their little tongue, their little proboscis unfurl, and they use it for lapping and sucking fluids like water, nectar, and honey. Bees also have a jaw, better known as mandibles, and they use that to chew pollen. They also use it to shape beeswax. Best bee question you could torture your bee friends with is you say, hey, put your fingers on your head and show me where the bee antenna are connected. And everybody always wants to take their fingers and put them on top of their head, but they're not. Their antenna are connected down towards the lower part of their eyes. And those antennae, you think about it in a beehive, it's pitch black, but they're super busy in there. So that antenna has all these little segments and they contain most of the touch and smell receptors of the bee. They get a lot of information off of those. These specialized organs help guide the bees both inside and outside the hive. And those antennae help them differentiate between a hive odor, a floral odor, or a pheromone odor. The thorax is that next area behind the head. That thorax contains all the muscles that control that bee's wings and the bee's legs. Bees have three pair of legs and two pair of wings. On each side of the bee, you've got two wings, and they literally connect together with these cool little pieces of comb. Also, when you look at the thorax and on the abdomen, they have these little holes on the side, which are called spiracles. And that's how a bee breathes. It doesn't breathe in and out of its mouth. Something we'll touch on multiple times, maladies next week when we talk about mite control. People like to do alcohol washes to test for mites, but there's some people that get very upset that they're killing 300 bees and a quarter cup of bees, and they like to put them in a jar of powdered sugar and shake, 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 and then the bees supposedly gets the mites off. That powdered sugar is going to clog up those spiracles. And yes, you may have saved your bees briefly, but those poor babies are going to go back in the hive and they're going to die anyway. The abdomen is the longest part of the bee. It is covered with these armor plates, and the stinger, if they have one, is located at the very end of the abdomen. Some of the bees have wax secreting glands, and they also have scent glands. All right, so the abdomen is totally different between workers, drones, and queens. Phyllis went over this in the beginning, and the worker bees, which are all female, have wax secreting glands on their abdomen and scent glands. The queen has ovaries for egg production. She's got a storage sac for drone semen, and she has many glands that produce pheromones and a sting, but the queen has no wax glands. The drone abdomen, the male bee, contains male reproductive organs, no wax glands, and no sting. Rare exception, sometimes nature screws up and the bee can have both male and female parts with that big word, but it rarely happens. So I was a beekeeper that did not have a mentor like the first 5, 6 years I did this till I met my ladies. And dumb me, I had no idea that drones could not sting me. So when you're sharing with your friends or your family or your grandkids, drones are great to pick up and hand around. Bees also have a honey stomach, a sac, or a crop. The esophagus of the bee, the food tube, begins at the back of the mouth, continues through that middle part of the bee, the thorax, and terminates at the beginning of the abdomen, where it expands and forms the honey crop. This is where the workers will temporarily store collected nectar, honeydew, and water. They go out, they bring it in from outside of the hive, and then another bee will come in and take that nectar and add things to it to turn it into honey. Bees carry a beneficial bacteria inside their stomachs, and as they're transferring both nectar and pollen, when they're unloaded into the hive, that bacteria gets built into both the honey and the bee bread, and it's really good for the bees. All right. Inside the colony, the honeybee colony is a super organism. Nobody in that hive can live on their own. The queen has to have the workers. You have to have the drones. It is a super organism. That hive cannot live for a very long period unless there are queen, workers, and drones. Inside the colony, their nest. So whether your bees are in a box or they're in a tree out in the wild, the honeybee nest is made of parallel combs filled with hexagonally shaped cells. That comb is made of beeswax that's produced by those workers' body. So on their abdomen, they produce these little flakes of wax. Then they use their mandibles to form it into the honeycomb. And there's two reasons for that honeycomb. One, it works as a pantry, they store food there. And two, it works as a cradle where the young bees called brood, or the eggs are laid. So on the right there is a picture of the nest. A good frame has this really cool pattern where you're going to have that open brood in the middle. You're going to have a band of pollen and a band of honey around that. So the bees have food sources there. Also, that band of honey around that pattern acts as an excellent insulator. Now, Phil had talked about this a little before, but there's a division of labor. You have your males, your drones, you have sterile females, your workers, and you have a fertile female, your queens. So these three types of individuals in this colony cannot change much, and each will not survive without the contribution of the rest. Bees are what we call they do complete metamorphosis. So there's 4 stages. They have an egg. Queen lays that egg. First 3 days, it looks like a little piece of rice in the bottom of that cell. Then that egg then turns into a larva, and the worker bees, or the nurse bees, I should say, provide food, and then they cap that cell with wax. Once that cell is capped with wax, then that larva, that wormy looking thing, turns into a pupa, the stage where it really starts looking like a bee. And we don't see it, but they actually form a cocoon around themselves in. And that's why over time, the inside of your cells, they get smaller, they look darker besides foot traffic because of that. And then you're going to have an adult that's fully formed, and it's going to chew its way out of the cell. Picture on the left shows you your different amounts of time. So a queen takes about 15 and a half days from start to finish. A worker bee takes about 12 days from start to finish. And those big old drones take about 14 and a half days. Well, I'm lying, 24 days from start to finish. The picture in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, that first one is an egg. The second one is a larva. And then those next 2 are pupa. And then that is my adult chewing her way out from that capped cell. On the bottom right shows you the sizes of bees in relation. So that will be a worker bee on the left. That is a sterile female. I have my queen in the middle with that great large abdomen. And then drones, they look like big Dusseldorfs, and they have these massive black eyes that literally touch on top of their head. Once you start looking at your bees, they're pretty darn easy to pick out. Okay, queen. She is the reproductive center of the colony. She is the only one that can lay fertilized eggs. She's the longest living individual in that hive. She's largest in size with that long tapering body. Queen gets hatched out. She's fed royal jelly. She's given a special comb that she goes into, and she's fed all this great food, and then she hatches out. Takes a little bit of time for her to harden off, and then she goes out and she finds this thing called a drone congregating area, DCA. And she goes out, and there'll be scientists are still figuring out, but there'll be an area that's just full of drones. And she will mate with 17 to 20 drones. Once she is mated, she will return to the hive. She will never leave that hive again unless she's swarming to move to establish another nest. And that's why it's very important. We'll talk more later on in the class about when you're splitting hives and you want your queen to be mated well. If she gets out, the weather's bad, she can't find the drones, you don't get a good mated queen. Worker bees. A fully formed female, her ovaries stay small. She does not get fertilized. She's underdeveloped due to the queen producing this pheromone. So a queen runs around on all the comb, and she leaves this pheromone that these female bees smell. And that pheromone causes those little worker bees' ovaries to stay small. You'll find something out later on called about a laying worker. We'll talk more as you get into this. And a laying worker is when my queen has disappeared and I've got a female bee and she's never been fertilized. So the only thing she can lay are male bees. And if I have a colony with nothing but male bees, it's going to die. Worker bees are the smallest individuals in the colony with the shortest lifespan. Worker bees have specialized structures. They got a barbed sting, they could sting you. They've got modified legs where they could collect pollen and they tap it in and bring it back on their legs. And they have a scent gland. And bees, they start off, they hatch out, and then they start as house bees. When they first hatch, they have to clean out cells. Then they get moved to nurse bees where they're taking care of brood. And then the last bit of their life, they go out and they become foragers. And that's the end of their life. They go out and bring things back. Then there's this one bee called winter bees. These bees are laid typically, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, typically in August into September, maybe a little earlier. Winter bees are physiologically different than my regular spring and summer bees. They have these things called fat bodies, and it allows these winter bees to be able to survive. Instead of lasting 28 days, they can last 4+ months to get through the winter. Drone bees, big bad boy. He is a haploid. He's a virgin birth. He only has half the chromosomes as the female because she lays an egg and it's not fertilized. Doesn't work that way in human world, but in bee world, it makes a drone. So he has no father. When a drone dies, I won't say it. When he dies, his phallus, his reproductive organ, is torn out in the mating process. So once he mates, he's dead. And these drones all come together in this drone congregating area. The queen is not going to mate with drones from her own hive. She flies pretty far so that she can get some genetic diversity within that breeding she does. Okay, I'm going to skip reading these. All right, how do bees communicate? You think about it, that hive is pitch black in there. Not only is that, you have bees go out and find nectar sources and pollen sources, and they come back and they do these crazy waggle dances. So they could tell the bees, based on the sunlight rays, exactly where they need to go and how far they need to go find that pollen and nectar source. So how do bees communicate? They use sight. They use sound. Once you start keeping bees for a while, you could get 2 queens in your hive. And these queens, one will hatch out and she'll go look for the rest of the queens. And usually she'll kill them off. And they make this weird little piping noise. If you have a queen, a colony that is queenless, you'll be working your bees and you'll crack your top and you'll hear them humming away in there. And then you'll get to your next hive and you'll crack it. And it sounds like there is a rock and roll screaming loud party going in there. That means there's no queen. They make a huge amount of noise. Bees also communicate by taste. Food sharing is a primary honeybee activity. They think it transmits nutrients and information back and forth between adults, as well as across different developmental stages. How do bees communicate? They use scent. They've got this whole class of chemicals called pheromones that can be different in the queens, workers, and drones. The queen produces a substance that keeps all those other female bees' ovaries little and shriveled so they don't lay eggs. Once that queen, if she dies, disappears, and there's not a queen, you can get multiple worker bees who will start laying eggs, but they will all be male bees because they are not fertilized. The queen's the only bee that gets fertilized. Worker bees secrete pheromones from their nasonoff gland to recruit bees from outside the colony. They have alarm pheromones. So when a bee stings you, it releases this pheromone, which causes other bees to say, hey, come get this person, come get this skunk. It lets them know. Bees also release scent from their feet. So they literally can smell using their antenna where other bees are walking around or where they have walked around in that pitch dark hive. They can literally track where others have walked. So when you're using your smoker, it's one way that tries to mask that alarm pheromone, which reduces those bees from getting very defensive. All right. When you do smoke your colony, a lot of bees, they will sometimes think fire and they will gorge themselves with honey. And when they gorge themselves with honey, they've got that honey sac coming down through their thorax that ends at the front of their abdomen. And when they gorge on honey, it makes their abdomen get really fat and it makes them less likely to sting, but they still can sting. They regulate their temperature by clustering. So, all of us the last couple of days, we've had this nice weather. We've gone outside to see if our bees are doing cleansing flights because they do not defecate. They don't poop in the hive. So they wait for days where it's warm like this. They break their cluster and they come out, they do their business and get back in. Bees have to keep their cluster, their brood nest, at a very specific temperature. So they either have to heat it or cool it. So bees collect water all the time and they use their wings to fan air currents through the colony. And when it's really hot outside, you'll go out and new beekeepers and even some of us experienced beekeepers are going, oh my gosh, are my bees swarming? They're all over the front of the hive. But it's just like hanging out on the front porch on a really hot day. Another pattern of behavior is the bees, they'll swarm. If you get a hive that has become very large, that queen travels all around that hive and she releases this queen pheromone. If it gets to the point that all these worker bees are not smelling her queen pheromone, it's telling them, hey, we need to leave and make a new nest. And they will literally swarm. They'll have queen cells that have been laid and capped. And the old queen will take half, if not more, of the bees and they leave and they'll go make a new hive somewhere else unless you catch them. That's an example of my bees years ago. It's a hot August day. So they just spill out, they hang on the front. And when you go back out the next morning, 9 times out of 10, they're all back in there. And that's it. Okay. Are we going to record while we do the quiz?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, I don't even check. Okay, I'm going to read the quiz questions. What are the 3 main parts of a honeybee's body?
It would be nicer. You can't see the people.
Oh, so I need off here.
Yeah,
Hold
if you
on.
can just quit sharing. Looking
Okay.
better. Almost there.
There we go.
Woohoo! There you are. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Let's stop. Due to you. Okay. All right. So, what are the 3 main parts of a honeybee's body?
Head, thorax, and abdomen.
Perfect. Head,
Good job.
thorax, abdomen. How many eyes do they have?
5.
Yes. Can you tell me how many simple and how many complex?
2 complex and 3 simple.
Perfect.
Good job, ladies.
What is a bee's tongue used for? Proboscis.
Lapping and sucking fluids.
Yes, like water, nectar, and honey. Perfect. What does the bee use its jaws, mandibles for? They bring dry stuff off of a flower. What's the
I have
dry
the,
stuff that they bring in pollen? So they chew the pollen and they add an enzyme to it. And then they produce wax from their abdomen. And they're going to chew with those mandibles, with those jaws to shape that wax because it comes off in little itty bitty flecks. It's really cool. And then they will shape it into the shape of the comb. Where are most of the touch and smell receptors located on a bee? Something that sticks out by their eyes.
Is it the antennas?
Yes, ma'am. Sure is. What does the thorax contain? This is kind of a broad question. And I'll let somebody try and guess, but it's a poorly written question. That middle part of the bee, what is all connected to there?
I have all muscles that control the 2 pair of wings and 3 pairs of legs.
That is 100% correct. Perfect.
Hey, good job.
What is a spherical and where are they located? Powdered sugar messes them up.
I have their pair of holes, and that's what they breathe through,
Yes, ma'am. You are absolutely correct.
but I don't know where they're located.
They're located along their sides. And if once she has that up, I have that picture in there, and I should know how many pair there are, and I don't. I'll learn that next year.
It's okay.
What is the
That's next
longest?
year.
What is the longest part of a bee? Head, thorax, or abdomen?
Is it abdomen?
Yes, ma'am. Head's fairly small. Thorax is shorter and bulky, but then that abdomen's the longest part. Which are the only caste of bees that can secrete wax?
Worker,
Yes, ma'am. Worker bees. Queens don't make wax. Drones don't make wax. Is this, oh, I didn't go over this well. Is the stinger the same on a worker bee and a queen bee? And I didn't say this.
No.
Ooh, who said that?
Brandy.
Brandy.
We learned that in class 1.
Yay. So Brandy, what's different about the queen stinger?
It doesn't have a barb, right?
It can not have a barb or very small because that queen bee, when she goes to kill another queen, she could sting it repeatedly versus a worker bee has that barb, and that worker bee can only sting one time because that barb then will tear out the content of the intestines. Excellent. Can a drone, a male bee, sting?
No.
Nope. And what do the bees use the wax comb for inside a hive? When you open up that hive and you look at your frames, what do you see inside of those little individual cells?
Well, like storing honey and pollen and
Yep, they store food. What else do you find in there that gets capped?
eggs.
Eggs and brood. Yes, ma'am. Perfect. What are the 4 stages of metamorphosis?
egg, larva, pupa, and adult.
Perfect. And how do bees communicate?
Scent.
Sense
Sound.
1, sound,
I forget the other.
eyes, sight, and taste. And that's my quiz.
Good job, ladies. That was some
You
good
guys-
questions there, Sue. Very good.
Yeah, that was well done. I enjoyed
Mhm.
listening to you, Sue.
God
Mhm.
bless you. And I
So
forgot
does
the
anybody
camera's
have
on.
any questions for Sue or
They can unmute mute now, can't they?
yeah, you can unmute. Yeah, good deal. Yeah, only when she's presenting or they are presenting.
Well, hopefully I won't be the tissue queen next week.
I hope you're not either.
I don't have any questions, but good job, Sue. I didn't even see your quiz, so I'm pretty tickled that I'm starting to retain some of this stuff.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
so
Excellent,
good.
excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, you got to listen to me for one more week. And then they
Yeah.
fire me and somebody else is doing the rest of them.
And then I think it's Debbie's turn.
All right.
Close to it. Does anybody have any questions about anything that's going on, either with your bees or what to expect? And I see that some on Facebook, some people, put in their orders for their bees, which is good because a lot of people, especially if you deal with nukes, their list fills up fast
Yep.
and you're going to be holding empty boxes. So good job
I
on you.
lost one hive. Went out yesterday in my nightgown and my bee suit. I was quite attractive. I'm thankful I have no neighbors. And I lost a hive. I live on 22 acres of a hill. And I have this low stand I've complained about to these ladies for 3 years. I think it's more damp. And that was the last hive off that stand. So that stand was in last week's slides and it's ready to go into the bonfire. So
Good.
I opened it up and yeah, they were getting robbed big time.
I've got one that's weak, and that's the one that I had the mite problem with.
Uh-huh.
But I went in and checked all my feed today, and my biggest and strongest hives have not touched the sugar board.
Good. That's
The
wonderful.
other ones have, but
That's what you want.
my five
Mm-hmm.
biggest hives, except for one. I mean, and I open that and they're festooning and everything else. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but some of my biggest hives, they haven't touched a thing, which is phenomenal.
Well, good for
My
you. Good.
my five that are left, I took the ratchet straps off and lifted them from the back and I can barely lift them still. But when
Mhm.
I popped and looked at the top, they're 8 and 10 frames of solid bees. So being that, I lost a lot of hives last year due to life, I still have close to 15 gallons of honey sitting in my garage. So I'm just going to split hard this year. And then I'm going to be back to listening to Bob, Benny, and Phyllis on splitting
Yep.
hives, Michael Palmer, and I'm
Put
going to
me up
split hard
there.
this
Yeah,
year.
that's
So
good.
It's nice, if I lose a hive, I know that I have to split hives. If you don't split them, they swarm on you.
that's all right. I got 20 frames of
Not
wax.
necessarily. No, that's not a
Well,
true
you know what
statement.
I mean in general. If
No, I know what you mean, but these ladies don't know what you mean.
Right.
So everybody will tell you, new ladies, that when you get a big hive to split it down, what most people want to get honey production. Well, you take that, you know, a box or whatever of bees out, then you're not going to get honey production. So there's ways. You have to be in them every 10 days and look for queen cells and add boxes and keep them happy. And you can have huge, that's another reason why a lot of my honey producers have multiple, um, supers on them is because they need that room.
Yep.
So if your hive's big, don't think you have to split it. Sorry, Kathy, but I couldn't let you get away with that one.
Well, I want to split a couple of them because I want to get to 10 and I
Right.
want to
Then
put
that's
something.
totally different, but that's not because you don't want them to swarm. You
Right.
want more bees. Right. Yeah. And that's great. I mean, I'll be doing that the same. And keep my honey producers big and my other one, my dinks or whatever, then that's what I'll
I always
expand
get
from
one
there.
or two hives that get really big and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
beekeepers, I've been listening to the same talks from certain people over and over, and I learned something different every time because you're going to start with your bees this year and think, gosh, what were they talking about? And then
Right.
something will strike you. The next year, when you hear the people talk about the same topic again, you'll go, oh, that's what they meant. And I've been doing
Exactly.
this for like 10, 12 years, and I still get that, oh, that's what they're doing.
Sure.
And I admit it, I have no shame.
Yeah. Well, we've all gone through it. If you have 5 years under your belt, you've gone through a lot of different scenarios and all that for sure.
Can, can I expand on something Sue was talking about?
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
have I have this great book. It's called Honeybee Democracy, and
Yes,
it's
Tom
a really
Seeley.
good book. Yeah.
I have that one.
And there's a passage in here about the drone congregation areas. And what he says is every sunny afternoon, once a drone reaches sexual maturity at about 12 days of age, he will fly from his hive looking for action. In ways that remain mysterious, he will find his way to one of the traditional honeybee mating areas, the drone congregation areas, within a few miles of his home, and will fly about this aerial pickup spot waiting for a young queen to appear. If one does, he will zoom after her, and if he manages to outrace his rivals and contact the queen, he will inseminate her in flight 10 to 20 meters up in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've also read that these drone congregation areas, they like certain types of landscape, and they will they like where terrain changes, where it goes from trees to like fields, and
Mhm.
they'll be pretty, you can't really see them. I mean, 20 to 30 feet is 30 to 60 feet is pretty high,
And
but
there's a
Right.
lot of drones there.
there's a lot of drones, and what they've been trying to do is send up balloons to look for them and track them.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting. Somebody knew of a Wendy's parking lot that was a drone congregation area,
Oh, wow.
and
Getting them a frosty.
they would see all of these dead bees on the ground, and they were all drones, and it was because it was a drone congregation area.
That's so cool. Well, Tom Seeley, they
It's-
were using not bee drones, but drones themselves. And then they put those little radio transmitters onto their
Yeah,
thorax so they
Yeah.
could
yeah,
track them. But they also use these wonderful things called graduate students. And they send these
yes.
graduate students out. And these kids have to run through the woods and they follow the bees to where they go. And you can literally almost watch a path because bees will follow a very specific path to where they're going.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah, it's
called a
graduates.
beeline.
Yeah, so cool.
Yes.
Thanks,
In
Boo.
fact, speaking of beeline, there's an old Lassie episode where what was his name? Jeff and Porky were going to do a project. I think it was 4-H, and they were going to raise honeybees, but they needed to find them. And what they were doing was they were looking for honeybees and then following them back into the woods to find the hive. And then they smoked the hive in the tree and they caught them, but they followed the bee line. And that's
That's so
how
cool.
people used to get them. It's really interesting. You could
He's
see it
got
on
4 books out.
YouTube.
He's got a
Yeah.
new one out, Piping Hot Bees or something I just picked up a couple months ago.
Well, the beekeeper that I was talking with in Ireland, he follows Tom Seeley.
Yeah, he spoke via computer at 2 years ago in Monroeville, the conference I'll go to this weekend. Because I got to go up on stage and introduce him, but unfortunately it was via computer and not via human. He is a very smart guy.
But I just thought I'd say a little bit about that, being that I read it.
Very cool.
Well, I have gone out to my out yard before, and on top of uh, the the lid, I've seen a drone dead on top of one of the lids with his backside out. So he was mating her, and she went over there, and he dropped off of her. So I thought that was pretty cool. I have a picture of it somewhere. Yes, I took a picture, but it's somewhere. And
Bee
yeah.
porn.
People.
And I also have seen queens come back with the drones business in it, still in her.
Well, you
So
mated well, it's got to be 15, 20 drones.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
big sperm whales in the ocean, they mate and they produce gallons of sperm, and that's the males will go after the female, trying to wash out all the sperm that the former male put into her. I mean, it's crazy.
Hmm.
But it again, it introduces that genetic diversity. That's the only place you can get it, which is really
Right.
cool.
Right.
Ladies, I hate to do this. I'm gonna run. My nose, you don't need to see me wipe my
Yeah.
nose
Well,
anymore.
my daughter's
Thank
here
you.
from West Virginia. Thanks, Sue. So I'm going to have to cut it short too, because I'm in her bedroom. So,
Well,
and
she
we're
got
wearing
there
her out.
safe. Good.
You what?
She got there safe and sound.
She did. She did. We've been fishing for 2 days and
Good.
she skunked us. So, but does anybody else have anything they want to say, or we can stop recording if